Well, thank you for who's on the presentation right now. So I have been tasked with C, behavior change considerations from the task list. Feel free to put your questions. Let me get rid of that transition there. Let's see, C, behavior change considerations. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. If you wanted to unmute your microphone at any point and ask questions, feel free to do that as well. Be happy to answer them. C is pretty, I would say it's pretty straightforward, but it's pretty simple. There's only 3 sections, so it's the smallest one by far. There's just C1, the side effects of reinforcement, C2, side effects of punishment, and then 3 side effects of extinction. So I'll go through each one of those. So state and plan for the possible unwanted effects of reinforcement. So this one is a little harder to identify because you wouldn't think that there would be a whole lot of unwanted effects of reinforcement, but there definitely are. So reinforcer dependency. So that's the main one, is an individual becoming too dependent on the reinforcer. So in order for them to have appropriate behaviors, engage in appropriate behaviors, they're dependent on that reinforcement to occur. We're always looking to fade the reinforcement to naturally occurring reinforcement. So that's why we're consistently trying to pair, social praise and naturally occurring reinforcement and then with under negative reinforcement context, just removal of an aversive event, trying to fade those to naturally occurring reinforcement options rather than having a lot of secondary and supplemental reinforcers that are added that are harder to fade. So thinking about the schedules of reinforcement. So thinking about the fixed ratio to variable ratio. So we're always working towards initially starting off with an FR1, but then fading to the VR schedule as quickly as possible. So then it's variable and intermittent. So that's going to maintain that behavior long term. Next one here, choosing reinforcer magnitude. So this is one, as a behavior analyst, you're continuing to evaluate, similar to the fading of the reinforcement in general. Thinking about the magnitude of the reinforcement and also along with that, considering the response effort. So the response effort, with the response effort being high, you want to you would have a higher magnitude of reinforcement than a behavior which their response effort was really low. So for instance, if we had a client that had difficulty emitting forward mands, we'd want to have higher reinforcement for that versus a 1-word mand or 2-word mand. So thinking about the reinforcer magnitude and then fading that over time to where if you were teaching that 4-word mand and then you wanted them to use more complete 5, 6, 7-word sentences, to change that magnitude of that reinforcement and fade that out. And then just the overall appropriateness of the reinforcer. So I know something that comes up a lot, and you're getting a lot of feedback probably from the outside world into ABA, is that all we do is give kids food all day long and they just act appropriately. So edibles, thinking about the appropriateness of that as a reinforcer, and really you should only rely on edibles as reinforcement if they really don't have any other reinforcing options. If you conducted a preference assessment and there weren't a whole lot of preferences and really they were just motivated through food, and then work on fading that out and reinforcer conditioning to condition new reinforcers. And then thinking about the appropriateness of the reinforcer as far as its ability to generalize. Is everybody going to have a snack cup or a fanny pack full of edibles that they're giving to an individual? So just thinking about that when selecting the reinforcement. If it's only occurring in one environment, then it's not going to be as effective. So making sure that the appropriateness of the reinforcer, that it can occur in multiple environments, and that it's socially appropriate. So having a social praise that's over the top, that works great for a 2-3-year-old, but then you're working with a 18-year-old, making sure that it's still socially appropriate, whether it's high fives, pound, different ways to have that be socially appropriate. And what I have broken down for C1, 2, and 3 is I have a corresponding video that I'm going to try to talk through and pause and draw the comparison of the unwanted effects as it relates to the video. And I'll check when you send a chat, it pops open for me at the top, so feel free to send a chat at any point or just interrupt. And then we just tested this out, but let me know if you cannot hear the audio for this.
Are you finished?
Well, thank you. How thoughtful. Would you like a chocolate?
Yeah, sure.
So you can think about right there the social appropriateness of that reinforcer and him handing it to her in her mouth like a dog. So thinking about how that can be perceived in the social appropriateness and if that is going to be generalized and people are going to be doing that in other environments. But also he did pair, which was good, the social praise with the reinforcer.
Thanks. Oh, sorry, Sheldon. I almost sat in your spot.
Did you? I didn't notice. Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
You're here a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace him with.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
Sheldon, you can't train my girlfriend like a lab rat.
Actually, it turns out I can.
Might not be able to hear it, so let me make sure that.
Well, you...
Is everybody else having issues hearing that?
Hear it just fine.
All right. So what just happened in this situation is he's giving her positive reinforcement with the edibles for her appropriate behaviors, and Leonard here is talking about how you can't train his girlfriend like a lab rat. But thinking about how this applies to the side effects of reinforcement or the unwanted effects of reinforcement, thinking about the social appropriateness side of this and how this can be perceived from the outside if we have a box of edibles and we're following a client or an individual around Target, giving them edibles consistently, and how that might be an unwanted effect in the sense that it could be socially isolating to them and have the negative social effects there. Continue playing this here.
Shouldn't.
There's just no pleasing you, is there, Leonard? You weren't happy with my previous approach to dealing with her, so I decided to employ operant conditioning techniques, building on the works of Thorndike and B.F. Skinner. Yet by this time next week, I believe I can have her jumping out of a pool, balancing a beach ball on her nose.
No, this has to stop now.
I'm not suggesting we really make her jump out of a pool. I thought the bazinga was implied. Just tweaking her personality. It's sanding off the rough edges, if you will.
No, you're not sanding Penny.
Are you saying that I am forbidden from applying a harmless, scientifically valid protocol to make our lives better?
Yes, you're forbidden.
Bad, Leonard. You know, using positive reinforcement techniques, I can train that behavior out of her in a week.
No.
If you let me use negative reinforcement, I can get it before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
Forget it.
Come on. You can't tell me that you're not intrigued about the possibility of building a better girlfriend.
I'm not.
Are you
All right,
finished?
if it is cutting out here, I can move on to the next slide. Oh, okay. Let me.
No.
If you let me use negative reinforcement, I can get done before we go to bed.
You're not squirting her in the face with water.
No, of course not. We're talking very mild electric shocks. No tissue damage whatsoever.
Forget it.
Oh, come on. You can't tell me that you're not intrigued about the possibility of building a better girlfriend.
I'm not. Penny's qualities, both good and bad, are what make her who she is.
You mean like that high-pitched, irritating laugh?
Yes.
You wouldn't prefer a throaty chuckle?
You're not changing how Penny laughs.
No, that would be incongruous. I was going to lower the voice to a more pleasing register.
Sorry, guys. That girl is freaky.
Come again?
Freaky.
Freaky?
Yeah, freaky.
Have a chocolate.
Thank you.
Well, I'm going to make some more milk and then turn in. I trust if you two are planning on engaging in amorous activities, you'll keep the decibel level to a minimum.
Of course.
Thank you.
These are so good.
Unbelievable.
What?
I was just thinking we should probably turn into.
Well, my new bed got delivered. If you come over and put it together and stay at my place.
Really, that's a lot of work and it's kind of late.
Yeah, but if we stay there, we won't have to be quiet.
Let's go.
Interesting. Sex works even better than chocolate to modify behavior. I wonder if anyone else has stumbled onto that.
All right. So yeah, so that was the state and plan for possible unwanted effects of reinforcement, which is rather limited. It's more geared towards the reinforcer dependency and failure to fade reinforcement appropriately. So there, you get a situation where an individual is resistant when you do try to change the schedule of reinforcement, and the behavior, the appropriate behavior, does not continue to occur or persist. The next one here, C2, is state and plan for the possible unwanted effects of punishment. So these ones are a little more clear, and some of these you could just kind of think about even without, just in the history of understanding punishment, how punishment can occur and can be really inappropriate. So the first one here, punishment-induced aggression or other undesirable behavior. So I've seen there are certain studies that publish quote-unquote emotional behavior. But thinking about when you implement punishment, you may get an increase in other undesirable behaviors. So you may see this when somebody introduces timeout, and then the person or the individual that's being placed in timeout, or the punishment procedure that's being implemented with that person, may engage in a lot of other undesirable behaviors, crying, screaming, maybe some aggression, and that's punishment induced. So that's as an effect of the punishment, they're engaged in those other undesirable behaviors. Behavior contrast, the next one there, the punisher needs to be present. So you'll see this with certain individuals that when they're not present and they are the punisher, the behavior the problem behavior will persist. So thinking about, I like to use the example of mom and dad, where dad is the punisher, and when mom's around, a lot of the behavior continues to occur, but then when dad walks into the room, the behavior ceases. So you get that behavior contrast, but also with the behavior contrast, you may get a reduction in the behavior when the punishment procedure is present, and then you actually might get an increase in the undesirable behavior when that punisher is not present. All right, next one, reduction in appropriate behavior. So you might get some generalized punishment to where you implement a punishment procedure for a specific behavior, but due to the nature of the punishment procedure, you may engage in just less appropriate behaviors across the board because you've generalized those punishing effects. So that's another thing to think about, unwanted effect. So the next one, modeling the use of inappropriate behaviors. So again, if you're implementing a punishment procedure and it's something, you think about the more corporal punishment procedures of spanking or things like that. You're modeling the use of those punishment procedures when they're being implemented, when the punisher is implementing those. So that could definitely be an unwanted effect, is that the person being punished then uses that punishment in the future and they may not use it in an appropriate context. So we can see this a lot with individuals who grow up with a lot of punishment in their environment, and then they use that as the model for how they should behave towards others in their environment. So again, an unwanted effect of the punishment is that it's being used for others without that actually being the intent. And then the last one there, overuse or reliance on the punishment procedure. So what you'll see a lot of is individuals, the implementer, the person implementing the intervention, use punishment because it's pretty quick and easy to decrease behavior, but really punishment should be used with reinforcement and extinction, and reinforcement should outweigh the magnitude of the reinforcement should outweigh the punishment. So people may overuse or rely on punishment because it can be easier to implement, and punishment shows a quick reduction in behavior. So that's another unwanted effect there. So I have another video here. Hopefully we don't have any technical issues, and I'll try to pause and comment on the video showing the use of punishment. We can kind of see some unwanted effects within the video.
Hey, Evelyn, can I ask you a question? You got a moment? Which team do you play for?
Well, I'm a peach.
Well, I was just wondering, because I couldn't figure out why you would throw home when we've got a 2-run lead. You let the tying run get on second, and we lost the lead because of you. Now you start using your head. That's that love that's 3 feet above your ass.
So there's the punishment-induced behavior there. So her crying is a result of the punishment procedure being implemented. So that would be an unwanted effect, that it's causing other behaviors to occur when that punishment is implemented.
Are you crying?
No.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Why don't you leave her alone, Jimmy?
Oh, you zip it, Doris. Rogers Hornsby was my manager, and he called me a talking pile of pig shit. And that was when my parents drove all the way down from Michigan to see me play the game. And did I cry?
No.
No! And you know why?
No.
Because there's no crying in baseball. There's no crying in baseball! No crying!
What's the matter, Jimmy?
What? She's crying, sir.
I didn't mean to do that.
Perhaps you chastise her too vehemently. Good rule of thumb. Treat each of these girls as you would treat your mother.
Anyone ever tell you look like a penis with a little hat on?
You're out of here!
Oh,
right now, Jimmy, I heard that!
You misunderstood me! You can't throw me out for that! No, you got us straight! I can't believe no one ever told you that before!
That's who you be. I'm in charge now. All right, who's
Then
up?
you might run into issues like that as well, where you can see everybody when the punisher is being punished. You may see other people that show pleasure in that occurring. And one thing I didn't have on that previous slide, but one thing that would be important would be kind of the fear, and that might be go along the lines of why appropriate behaviors may not occur, and appropriate behaviors may result in that generalized punishment. But just thinking about the fear that it could occur, where somebody in that environment where the punisher is present may be fearful to engage in other behaviors or appropriate behaviors. So they're limited their access to reinforcement might be limited just by that punishment being present. All right, and again, C is a really short one. So C3, this is the last one, state and plan for the possible unwanted effects of extinction. So the two most common ones, which everybody that's sitting for their BCBA exam should know these pretty well by now. Extinction burst, so that's the sudden increase in behavior. And then again, along the lines of punishment, it may induce other behaviors. So they may, if they have a behavioral hierarchy where they're low on the hierarchy is just their whining and negative vocalizations, where the top of the hierarchy might be severe aggression or self-injury, they may actually increase their behaviors and increase the intensity and severity of the behavior and go up that hierarchy and hope to gain access to that reinforcement that was extinguished. So the extinction burst is a sudden increase. Spontaneous recovery, the way I like to call this is testing the waters, where you get a reemergence of a previously extinguished behavior. And the important part of there is that you remain high fidelity and have high fidelity in the protocol and the procedure, the intervention being used, so that it will reduce back to the previously low rates, desirable rates there. So spontaneous recovery, I like to think about it as testing the waters, but it's a reemergence of that previously extinguished behavior. And then response variation, to where if you extinct one topography of a behavior, you may get either novel behaviors or a variation in the topographies of a similar behavior. So maybe if they have aggression that they're hitting you and you place the hitting on extinction, they may start scratching or pinching or biting and have new variations in those topographies of those behaviors. So it can be a good or bad thing. So unwanted effects, if we talk about the bad things again, is that you'd have the different topographies of that problem behavior that would emerge after that extinction is implemented. And then the good, it actually might be good in a sense that they may have variation in the response to where they have the replacement behavior that they're emitting, so you can provide the reinforcement for that. The most common ones here that everybody falls back on, and you probably will most likely contact on your test, is extinction burst and spontaneous recovery. Another Big Bang video. It's one of my favorites here.
For the sake of argument, let's say I have a problem. What would be your plan for addressing it?
I'm going to recondition your brain so that the need for completion isn't so overwhelming.
By playing tic-tac-toe.
Yep, your turn.
Oh, Amy. And you wonder why people think neuroscience is nothing but a goofy game for diaper babies. Tic-tac-toe can only end in win, lose, or draw, none of which will deny me closure. Especially since I'm about to win. Well, we didn't finish.
Exactly. For the land of the free and the home of the... Next. It's quite an impressive layout, isn't it?
Yes.
So they're thinking about punishment, and I guess, if you think about punishment as a reduction procedure and decreasing behavior, extinction would be similar to that. And you can see that punishment there, to where he had that fear response where he was scared of what she was going to do next. So that's something that could happen is that fear component.
Let's box it up.
Let's box it up.
That's enough. Give it!
So you can see there as well, when she had denied access to the reinforcement, had the punishment included in there, he had some other emotional responses and other behaviors.
Okay, Sheldon, make a wish and blow out the candles. Oops, missed one. Now your wish can't come true.
Lucky for you, because I wished you were dead. Oh, yeah. There he is. And the home of the brave. Don't stop. Yes, keep going. Just like that. Almost there. Almost there.
So you can see what that last section there, what happened too, is thinking about it being a punishment procedure is it's only going to be effective if that punishment procedure punisher is in place there. So I see how he got access to all that reinforcement that he was seeking because the punisher was not present. All right, and then I just have questions because that was the last one there, and there was one question in the chat. Can you please explain resurgence? Sometimes it is one of the options of answers with spontaneous recovery and burst and resistant to extinction. Good question. Resurgence. I know that there is, reemergence or resurgence of a behavior that had previously been extinct. So that if you think about spontaneous recovery, if you are implementing an extinction and you get the generally what you get is you get the increase in the behavior, which will actually exceed baseline rates during the extinction burst, and the behavior decreases to where it's at very low levels, and then you might get a sudden increase in that behavior. And let me go ahead and stop sharing my screen real quick. I actually have a graph I could show you guys as an example for this. You might get that the behavior, has that spontaneous recovery point, and at that point, if the intervention is not continued with high fidelity, what may happen is you have a resurgence or reemergence of that problem behavior, or that behavior that was previously extinguished because that protocol was not in place and they received access to that reinforcement. But let me go ahead and let me pull up a visual for you guys for a graph. Let me just give me 1 second here. I pull open this PowerPoint. And really with extinction, the key to it is that the protocol, the intervention remains consistent and in place and is maintained with high fidelity. Pulling up this graph here. Go ahead and share my screen again. So if we look at this graph, this is a good depiction of a extinction where we have the baseline levels of behavior, then the behavior exceeds the baseline levels during the extinction burst, and then decreases to 0 levels, and then this would be the spontaneous recovery point to where you have the reemergence of the behavior, and if that behavior at that point they end up contacting reinforcement for that extinguished behavior, and the protocol is not, and the intervention is not maintained in place with high fidelity, then you may see it increase back to the extinction burst rates, or just remain higher than it was previously when it was previously extinguished. So that's the important part about spontaneous recovery, is making sure you keep the intervention in place and maintaining that with high fidelity. Good question though.